They have been held in the notorious Evin prison and have not been allowed to see a lawyer. After languishing in custody for more than a year, the seven are due to be brought to trial in Tehran, or were due to be brought to trial in Tehran on July 11th. But the trial was abruptly postponed at the last moment and no new trial date has been named. International reaction to the imprisonment has been strong. British Prime Minister Gordon Brown met with members of the UK Baha'i community just last month and underlined his government's concern over the seven leaders' detention. Also last month, the Norwegian foreign minister called in the Iranian charge d'affaires to express concern about the human rights situation in Iran, including that of religious minorities. In May, the Australian Parliament called upon Iran to release the seven, while the European Union reiterated concerns about violation of religious freedoms in Iran. The EU statement mentioned persecution of Christians, Baha'is, and others, and urgently called on the Iranian authorities to uphold their international legal undertakings to safeguard religious freedom and to stop their persecution of legitimate religious activities. Also in May, Canadian Foreign Minister Lawrence Cannon publicly called upon Iran to release the seven Baha'is and cease the harassment of members of the Baha'i faith. We believe, he said, they are being detained solely because of their faith. Here in the United States, resolutions have been introduced in both the House and Senate. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of House Resolution 175, which condemns the government of Iran for its state-sponsored persecution of the Baha'i minority and calls for release of the seven. The resolution has 69 co-sponsors, a sizable number, but one that we should work to increase, and I hope increase dramatically. The Senate companion has 15 co-sponsors. Our State Department has periodically issued statements condemning the arrest, detention, and possible trial of the seven, but the difficult truth is the United States has little direct leverage over events in Iran, a situation that has lasted 3 decades. As most of you are doubtless aware, more recently 3 American hikers were detained by Iranian authorities on July 31st for allegedly crossing the border between Iraqi Kurdistan and Iran, and our government has only been able to communicate with them via Swiss diplomats who represent U.S. interests in the absence of formal diplomatic relations between Iran and the United States. American diplomats have been working with the EU, the UN, and others to try to put to a halt Tehran's support for terrorism, its pursuit of the nuclear fuel cycle, and an Iranian bomb. Successive administrations have tried sanctions, inducements, threats, reassurances, insults, and flattery. We have sought to work through our European allies. We have sent messages via the UN and the International Agency, Atomic Energy Agency, but nothing has changed the frozen dynamic of U.S.-Iranian relations, nor the relentless march toward the Iranian capacity to build nuclear weapons. Even a direct offer of a new beginning from President Obama has not yet induced Iran's leader to reassess the desirability of maintaining their hostile stance. My own sense is that the Iranian leadership is truly uncertain what to do with the seven Baha'i, especially now that this spring's presidential election in Tehran has destabilized the regime and empowered reformers. The decision to postpone what many were calling a show trial seems to indicate uncertainty at the top levels in Tehran, doubt over international reaction to a trial, and potential spillover effects in the nuclear arena. A trial and severe sentence would probably ignite a worldwide campaign on behalf of the defendants and would serve to galvanize European public opinion against Tehran even more than at present. Taken together with the bloody crackdown after the almost certainly fraudulent re-election of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, a trial could be a vital precursor to harsher sanctions and more international isolation. At the same time, even though it is aware of the downside of trying the seven, the regime is unlikely to free outright the leaders of a faith it deems as apostate, especially given the severity of the charges that the accused face. Furthermore, decades of propaganda will have been effective in turning many Iranians against the Baha'i, and the current regime will likely want to hold on to them, if only to use them as a distraction at a moment of maximum political difficulty in the coming months. The question for us, how hard should we as a government push on behalf of the seven? The United States has a long and proud history of advocating on behalf of the oppressed, and I've made human rights a centerpiece of my national security policy since coming to Congress in 2001. I pushed our government to take a stronger stance against the genocide in Darfur, even as I have championed the cause of recognition of the Armenian genocide of 1915 to 1923. I've sent letters to China's leaders on behalf of political prisoners and Falun Gong practitioners, and formed a caucus dedicated to press freedom around the world. But I've also seen that there are times when American efforts prompt a reaction contrary to our intentions. So we have to be strategic and we have to be thoughtful about the approach we undertake. It's a delicate balance. Early this spring, by way of example, I authored a resolution urging the North Korean government to release Laura Ling and Yuna Lee, the two American journalists who are being held by Pyongyang for 5 months. Although the resolution was drafted in consultation with the State Department, just before it was to come to the floor for a vote, we consulted with the State Department and were asked to postpone given the fluidity of the situation. I didn't know the former president, was being dispatched. Given the successful mission of former President Clinton, it is plain there is also a time for quiet diplomacy and sometimes just plain time to allow governments to extricate themselves from a bad corner. So I'm interested to hear your perspectives, especially Judge Nelson, from you and others about how the Congress and our government can more effectively work to free the 7 Baha'i leaders. And having said that, I'd be more than delighted to respond to any comments or questions folks might have.
Several decades ago, when my husband was chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is and went to the Congress to present our case of persecution, I don't think there was one congressman who came close to having the knowledge that Congressman Schiff displayed today. And for that, I commend him highly. We will have time for questions in a few minutes, but I first have the great privilege of introducing another great friend. To me, our police chief is the model police chief of the world, and had the great privilege of being able to work with him through the Western Justice Center to introduce progressive, outstanding concepts about policemen being trained to be mediators, about how to deal with youth on the streets. And everybody loved him so much that Bill Bogart had to worry because he was made interim city manager and decided that he'd rather be police chief, so you're safe, Mayor Bogart. Well, it's just a great deal of pleasure to introduce this police chief who has done so many good and progressive things. One of the great honors I had this year was to swear him in as president of the California Police Chiefs Association, to a roaring standing ovation. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce Chief Malecki to say a few words.